Yeah, you guys, you came after me. Now you're just, I was the originator, and now you're just imitating. It's much more than that. Anytime something new happens in the world, you have to open up a pathway for it. And so having to go first means, we call it, blazing a trail. Opening up the pathway means that now it's been done and others can come, and it's a little bit easier for them to do it. So this is a big deal. I did not realize that I would have this merit and this, but also this responsibility to open up the pathway for all those who come after. So, wow, the pressure's on. The pressure's on. All right. Let me ask you, is there something that's like, is there a buzz? Is there something people are excited about? Is there something people are discussing? Is there something that, is in the air right now? I mean, other than Corona and quarantine and all that?
Any comments? Rabbi, thank you for joining. Ari, I'm not ashamed to go first.
No problem.
It's Lori Kay's yard site, and there was a Chabad of Poway memorial service for her this afternoon. And I took away from that, not sadness, but a sense of empowerment and strength. And I think some of the comments, even Rabbi Sachs joined by video, but it was that we've got unique soul qualities of empowerment and strength, and that we overcome. And some of the comments were that we shouldn't hope to return to normal, that or pre-lockdown, and what we have an opportunity. We're spending more time with family and more time connecting on videos with friends and associates and family members afar. Any comments on that dynamic?
You mentioned a couple of things. There's a couple of very important points you just touched upon. I mean, one is about empowerment. The other is about not returning to normal. Yeah. Let me go out of order. I'll talk about the second one first, just because I feel like it's, I don't know, maybe it resonates with me more. There's an old Hasidic story that some Hasidim were sitting in Farbrengen, a Hasidic gathering, sitting around the table and singing and sharing and saying L'chaim. And they ran out of wine. So they asked, where's the wine? So the balabos, the one who was the host, it was his house. He says, it's in the cellar. So one of the guys went down to the cellar and he says, it's pitch dark down here. I can't see anything. So another one of the guests said, it's fine, just wait a little while and you'll get used to it. And when he came back with the bottle, so the mashpia, the one who was the mentor who was leading the gathering, he says, I just heard something really troubling. This guy goes downstairs to a pitch black cellar and he says, I can't see anything. It's pitch black down here. And then his friend tells him, just wait a while, you'll get used to it. He says, there you go. That's a metaphor. That's a metaphor for life, like we get used to things that are dysfunctional and we begin to normalize them, and they were never meant to be normalized. So, what's dysfunctional? If you look from a Hasidic point of view, there's a lot of stuff that we just sort of accept. It's totally unacceptable. And I don't just mean the fact that there's still a lack of world peace. Of course, that's unacceptable. That's dysfunctional. It's not the way the world was supposed to be. But even bigger things, like the fact that there's death. Who says that's a normal thing? That's not normal. Man was created to be immortal. And the fact that mortality was introduced is an aberration. So a lot of the, stepping away from status quo is about questioning things that we've normalized. And I think it goes a lot deeper than we even realize. There's a lot about life that is just not the way it is supposed to be. I mean, the term for it that we use we call it golus or galut, which is translated as exile. And it means, on the most simple level, it means the Jewish people were exiled from their land, that most recently the Romans came and they destroyed the temple and they exiled us from our land. And that even when we were able to return in small numbers, there was always a Jewish presence in the land, but without any autonomy, without any self-rule. So exile on a simple level means, the socio-political phenomenon of being exiled, literally being banished from our land. But the Hasidic understanding of it is much deeper than that. Exile really means the exile of the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is Hashem's nurturing presence. The divine presence is in exile. And that's not just a socio-political condition, that's a metaphysical condition, that the true inherent godly nature of all reality is hidden from reality. And that's the ultimate exile. So it's always good to question things and question the status quo, and to sort of reject things that we've normalized. So a break from the quote unquote norm, what I'll call, what we consider the norm, which really shouldn't be normalized at all. A break from the norm is a very healthy thing. It's an important thing. It helps us to start to question stuff that we've sort of just accepted as part of life. No, it doesn't have to be part of life. Suffering does not have to be part of life. It shouldn't be part of life. And, we should devote ourselves, each one with their own talents and their own ways, but each of us should devote ourselves to being part of the solution, which is nothing less than, the perfect reality that our tradition tells us to believe in and tells us to be a part of bringing. So, I think that's an important thing. When you talk about, utopian vision, the way people normally talk about it is very almost inherently dismissive. Like utopian has that connotation of, unrealistic, unattainable. It's interesting. There's an English word that comes from Spanish, quixotic, Quixotic, and it means unreasonably idealistic or hopeful. And actually it comes from the title character of the Spanish novel Don Quixote. Don Quixote is spelled, so we anglicize it to pronounce it quixotic, but it's from Quixote. So Don Quixote was this, some people read it as a satire, some read it more as in earnest, but he's this sort of, maybe you can call him a hero or an anti-hero, but he's a knight, he's a self-appointed knight, and he goes and lives out his fantasies. And whether or not we're supposed to laugh at him or supposed to laugh with him, that's a whole literary debate. It's a famous novel, it was written by Cervantes, who was like the Shakespeare of the Spanish language. So it's interesting, and you could ask the scholars for more verification. But I've heard very strong theories that Miguel de Cervantes was a crypto-Jew. He was from the Bnei Anusim. I mean, we know for a fact that many, many Jews, after the Spanish expulsion, after 1492, many Jews remained in hiding in Spain. The estimates, some say that as much as a third of Spain today may be Jewish or have Jewish roots. So that much is, we know. But there's a very strong literary theory that Cervantes was a Jew. And this part of it I haven't heard, but this is just my theory within a theory, that it makes a lot of sense that if the word quixotic, which means excessively idealistic, extremely hopeful, having huge dreams, if that comes from a character who was written by a Jew, that makes a lot of sense to me, that would be sort of an archetypical Jewish character. There's the old joke. I hesitate to tell it because it's just such an old joke that if you've listened to 100 sermons, there are certain like 12 jokes that get rotated. So if you spent 2 years in any shul, you heard, was it 52 weeks a year, you heard 104 sermons, and if plus Yom Tov, you've heard, there's 12 jokes that everybody has heard. Okay, this is one of them. This is definitely one of them, which is there's an announcement that in 3 days' time, there's going to be a flood and it's going to destroy the entire world, and there's not going to be any survivors. By the way, don't ask, I thought God promised never to destroy the world with a flood again after Noah. Yeah, he did, but this is a joke, so don't worry about it. Anyway, so that's the premise of the joke. So the Pope gets on TV and he says everybody has to get saved before the world comes to an end. And the Dalai Lama gets on TV and says everybody should become enlightened before the world comes to an end. And the chief rabbi of Israel gets on TV, says, brothers and sisters, we got 3 days to learn how to live underwater. So, right. That's sort of, that's the Jewish attitude, which is the normal is abnormal, unacceptably abnormal. And what you consider, meaning the world considers, or conventional wisdom considers abnormal, crazy, unreasonable, overly idealistic. No, that's normal. That's normal. And, there's nothing more Jewish than that. If you think about our whole story, our whole history, I think it was Frederick the Great, one of the Prussian Kaisers. He asked his advisor, he was an enlightened king. He was philosophical. He wasn't particularly religious. He asked his advisor, give me a proof for the existence of God that doesn't, depend on scripture, because he says, I'm not a religious man, but could you give me a logical proof for the existence of God? So his advisor says, Your Majesty, the Jews. Like, you want a proof of the existence of God? Go explain the Jews. Because, there's no nation that has continuity from the time the Jewish people came to inception. So it's right there, you have a statistical aberration, l'chaim. And then you have the fact that they were so persecuted that already now the numbers game becomes even more unlikely. And then they're so small. So now, statistically speaking, you just keep on making it more and more of a long shot until it becomes, it's like, how many times can you flip a coin and keep getting heads? And if you get tails one time, that's it, you're erased from history. And just over and over, it's at a certain point, it becomes an improbability that's just inexplicable. A tiny nation, so persecuted, in exile, and yet they outlasted all of these mighty superpowers that persecuted them. It doesn't make sense. It's not normal. And that's ultimately, that's the story of Judaism, that it's not normal, it's not natural, it's supernatural. And so, when you talk about readjusting our expectations or recalibrating, it's not enough just for us to say, look, it'd be an easy sell and everybody would nod their heads and say, yeah, that's a great message. I could say, it's nice that quarantine has reminded us to appreciate the simple things. And we need to have simpler lives. And, we don't need to spend as much money, and we need to spend more time with family. And that's an easy sell. And let me tell you, when you speak, you want people to like what you're saying. So a lot of times there's a Yetzer Hara. Definitely, the devil wants you to say something that people will like. So, you want to go for a slam dunk. So you say family bonding and quality time and simple values and less materialism. And everyone's nodding their head. But you want to know something? That's selling ourselves short. That's totally selling ourselves short. If we have life as we know it disrupted, and we're questioning everything because everything's up in the air. Let's go all the way. Let's literally go all the way. Let's say, like, let's question everything. Hunger, starvation, poverty, disease, war, none of it's acceptable. What's acceptable? The only thing that's acceptable is absolute prosperity and peace on earth for everybody. Is that crazy? No, that's not crazy. That's Jewish. Or maybe that's the point. That it is crazy, and that's particularly Jewish. So yeah, like, Jews have always been the radicals. You know that anytime there's been in history a radical movement, it always attracts Jews, always. The Rebbe particularly was an outlier in the sense that during the 60s, what's called the establishment, the religious Jewish establishment, was very, very frightened by the counterculture, by the hippies and the youth rebellion back in the 1960s. And the Rebbe was very much not for the counterculture itself, but recognized the spark of holiness that was within it. And in fact, there's a great story that one time there was a yeshiva bacher, a yeshiva boy, a yeshiva student, not from a Chabad family or yeshiva or background. And he came to the Rebbe and he asked him a few questions. And one of the things the Rebbe told him is, he said, in the 1930s, if you'd ask, regular Americans, what is communism and who's a communist? They would say, oh, that's one of those Jewish diseases. It's another one of those things that the radical Jews brought to us. The Rebbe said the same thing today, meaning in the 1960s when this conversation took place. If you would ask, regular decent Americans in middle America, who are the hippies? They would say, oh, those Jews from New York, right? So, but there's something to that. There's something to that idea of certain inherent radicalism within Judaism. I'll tell you, I have a friend who introduced me to really, really interesting, an article in Rolling Stone magazine from 1976 about young American Jews becoming Torah observant in Israel. Now, I was shocked. I didn't even think that such an article would have existed in the 1970s, and especially not in Rolling Stone. But the story is like this. There was this lady, Jewish lady named Ellen Willis, and she was the rock and roll critic for The New Yorker, a famous magazine, The New Yorker. And she was real counterculture. She was considered to be, even by her colleagues and her contemporaries, she was considered radical. Anyways, her brother went to Jerusalem and became religious. And so she wrote an article for Rolling Stone magazine called Next Year in Jerusalem. And it's all about her experiences among these American college-aged kids who became religious and are living in Jerusalem, basically her brother's friends. And it's a really fascinating account. But there's one thing that really struck me is she's hanging out with her brother and his friends, and their Rosh Hashiva, their mentor, their teacher, the rabbi who was teaching them is there. And she's watching how he converses with these college kids. So the rabbi, this Orthodox rabbi, he asks one of the college kids, what's the meaning of life? And one of the kids says, to serve God. And the rabbi says, no, pleasure. The meaning of life is pleasure, but you're going about it all wrong, because you are going for comfort, not pleasure. I'm going to teach you how to get pleasure, the greatest pleasure, spiritual pleasure. And she was really turned off by that because she'd been seeking self-transcendence. She writes about it. She says she used to take acid not to seek pleasure or fun. She was doing it for a self-transcendent experience. And she writes about the other things that she was into, where she was trying to experience ego death. And here this rabbi is telling her that the meaning of life is basically spiritual hedonism. I mean, spiritual, but hedonism nonetheless. And she was basically really, she said, I have to admit that there's something compelling about it. Like it's very warm, and like it wasn't as big of a turnoff as I thought it would be. But she's like, it's missing something. And I read that article and I thought to myself, you know, that's such a crying shame, because here she was a true Jew, a radical. She didn't want pleasure. She didn't want self-fulfillment, not even spiritual self-fulfillment. She wanted absolute self-transcendence, you know, to be part of the all, the one, the everything. And here this rabbi is telling her and these other kids, no, life is about, you know, this essentially this very, what I consider to be a very American capitalistic bourgeoisie type of, like, you know, acquisition of the better life, except he's just saying, except substitute an Orthodox life. It's so un-Jewish. It's so here she was so to speak, the non-religious one, because she's the hippie who's taking acid and listening to rock and roll. And here he's the rabbi and he's supposedly representing Judaism. But who is more authentically Jewish? You know, she's the radical. She's the one, she wants the age of Aquarius. She wants peace on earth. She's looking at life from a totally selfless and idealistic point of view. And he's telling her and these college kids, no, life really is the, you know, American middle class dream, except with a tweak. So you do it in a religious way instead of a, you know, such a shame. And I really believe that we lost a lot of Jews that way by trying to make them believe that we're normal, by trying to make them believe that we can have it all, we can have a normal life and even better. And it's not true. That's not what Judaism's about. Judaism is about being a radical, and it's about betting the farm. You know, like, don't hedge your bets. You don't keep a little, like, just in case the world won't ever reach perfection. Let me make sure that I keep my, you know, my ducks are in a row, that I should have a decent life. No, you bet it all. You go for broke and you say, it's, you know, Mashiach or bust. We're going for it all. We're going all the way. And, you know, I just ultimately, we're going to be forced to be honest in our marketing, because to try to brand Judaism as just another nice, normal way to live, you know, first of all, it's dishonest, but second of all, it doesn't even work anymore. The level of disillusionment, thank God, the level of disillusionment today, disenchantment, level of cynicism, it's great. The Talmud says before Mashiach comes, people are going to be totally cynical. That's a good thing. That basically, what does that mean? It means that I'm going to be totally apolitical here in saying that last presidential election, this is total, by the way, we're decidedly apolitical and nonpartisan. And this statement is nonpartisan. Last presidential election, the majority of people did not vote for a candidate. They voted against the candidate that they didn't like. And it seems to be that's probably what's going to happen again in the next election. So, but that's good. You know why? Because it used to be that we would make peace with quote unquote normal life and just, you know, settle for the lesser of two evils. You know, and some Jews will say that the D's are the lesser of two evils, and some will say the R's are the lesser of two evils. But you know what? If you're really Jewish and you're really radical, you got to come to the point where we don't want D's or R's. We want M. We want Mashiach. Like, no more settling. Winston Churchill said that, you know, democracy is the greatest form of government until you compare it with all the others. So what did he mean? He meant that it's flawed. It's deeply flawed because it's a man-made system of rule. And maybe it's the best man-made system of rule, but we don't want a man-made system of rule anymore. We want perfection. Why not? Why should we have anything less than perfection? We want absolute divine truth. That's what we want. We don't want to settle for less. So, you know, the disillusionment, the cynicism, it's all healthy. It's all good. The rejection of norms is good. Dissatisfaction with norms is good. The fact that the millennials are saying, you know, to the baby boomers, hey, you know, you told us that life's about getting a job and buying a house. We can't even do that. Okay, that's good. That's good, because getting a job and buying a house was distracting people from living a meaningful life. It was allowing them to settle. What happened? By the way, I mentioned before, Ellen Willis was considered a radical by her colleagues, especially after the 60s, when they all got normal corporate jobs. They hated her because she was the holdout. She continued to be a hippie, right? Because ultimately what happened is all the idealists from the 60s, they all eventually, you know, you got to be comfortable. So no, we don't want to be comfortable. Comfortable with what? Comfortable with exile? No, we don't want to be comfortable with exile. And we don't want the lesser of two evils. And you call us crazy, call us radical. That's fine. That's fine. Jews have always been crazy. Jews have always been radical. And there will come a point, and I think we're almost at it, maybe even we are at it already, where it'll become very clear that the insane choice is the only choice, because normal doesn't work anymore. Quote unquote normal doesn't work anymore. It's not viable anymore. So we have to go for broke and go for the ultimate goal and say, that's it. My life is not about being comfortable. It's not about a 401k, and it's not about home ownership. Life is about living a life that's bigger than me, for a purpose greater than myself, about caring about the big picture more than my personal comfort. Really, the deep theological ideas of self-transcendence and oneness with the all. That's not supposed to be philosophical. That's supposed to be practical in the life of a Jew. And we shouldn't be bribed by any of the comforts of a quote unquote normal life. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's really important, that we need to be comfortable with being radical and being crazy, and realizing how much chutzpah inherently there is in Judaism. That we're crazy. And every religion believes that if you're good, you'll go to heaven. That's not crazy. You know how crazy we are? We believe that we can make this world holier than heaven. That's crazy. But that's what we believe in. And that's not only what we believe in, we put our money where our mouth is. That's what we devote our lives to. So anyways, that's enough of that rant. That's what I have to say on that issue. And that's probably what I got for you for tonight.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. I should mention also that today is the second day of Iyar, which is the birthday of the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Marash, whose one of his defining statements was Lechatchila Areber, which means you got to go for it all, right? No hedging bets. You just got to go. I don't know if you want to make that connection, but I think
totally, it's right there.
It's right there. Yeah. It's, when you come to an obstacle, so what do? You go around it, you go, it does it get in your way? Do you go around it? Do you go under it? So the fourth Rebbe said, you know what I do? I go over it right away, which means no, there's no time for fooling around. You're just going for the gold, being radical, and the obstacle is not an obstacle. Yeah. So I want to say thank you to Rabbi Taub. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here for our inaugural Jewish Fireside Chat. What a way to get it started. I think after this radical session, we may have normal no, but hopefully not. Hopefully everything
never normal. You
got to keep it radical And I really was that last, I mean, it may be because it's the last thing that you mentioned, but that last line that you just said a few moments ago is really standing out for me personally, that, you know, every religion believes in heaven, but we're meshuggah enough to believe that that the purpose is creating heaven on earth. So with that, I'd like to encourage all of us here to do one more mitzvah, study a little bit more Torah, give more tzedakah, do one more thing to continue to be radical and continue making this world the beautiful garden and the paradise that it's meant to be. All right. So thank you again, Rabbi Taub. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Don't forget, next week, same bat time, same bat channel, Sunday night, 7 p.m. Tomorrow night, we have a course called Miracles. So let the supernatural continue. That begins 7:30 p.m. Monday nights. And it's great to see you all. All right. Sei gesund. Everyone should be well and stay safe, stay happy, and let's stay connected. All right. Have a good one. We'll see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you. Yashkoach.
Pleasure.